Hi guys, welcome back to Medical Coder Life. Today I wanted to talk to you about the office or other outpatient setting. I did a series on my other channel. Well, I did CPT E&M coding on my Codemaster Coach channel, and I talked about how to set your level of E&M visit. And you had to be in the right setting in your CPT E&M code books to assign the correct E&M code. Well, I wanted to make sure that I'm stressing some of the importance of the different healthcare settings, especially to my new coders here on Medical Coder Life who want to know what medical coding is all about and who are new to medical coding. So let's talk about an office and other outpatient setting, which is the first healthcare setting in the E&M section of CPT in your CPT code books. Now, an office or other outpatient setting is kind of like the brick and mortar building that you go to when you go to see your physician in his office. Now, this office can be a standalone building, or it can be within a hospital, but it's considered his physician office setting. So in other words, you're going in for, minor headaches, routine physical exams, stuff like that. But it's that level of service where you're not going to the emergency room or being admitted to the hospital yet. You're just going to see him in his office. Okay, that's the type of office and other outpatient setting that I'm referring to. And remember, once we get to that section, we have to distinguish between a new and an established patient. Because remember, we said a new patient is one who has not been seen by a physician or a physician in a group of physicians with the same specialty within the past 3 years. And an established patient is one who has seen that physician or a physician in that physician's group of the same specialty within the past 3 years. Now, what tends to happen is the physician will write an order. So where these services occur really doesn't matter. For example, I do a lot of ER coding, emergency room coding, and a lot of times a patient will come into the emergency room with a condition, and after a couple of hours of being in the ER, they realize this patient justifies being admitted to the hospital. And so then the physician will write an order to admit the patient to the hospital, inpatient care from the emergency room. So where I was going to assign an ER E&M visit code, once that order is written, I then can change and assign a higher level of E&M to an inpatient. It would be the initial inpatient E&M code, because as a coder, I want to get the maximum reimbursement for my physician, and legally I can do that. So in your physician's office, is if a patient comes in and based on their services or based on their condition, it justifies admitting the patient, whether it's to observation or to the hospital, I then can change from an office or outpatient setting E&M code, and then change and assign a higher level of code and assign that initial inpatient E&M instead of the office visit. Because when the physician decides to admit the patient to the hospital, their services for inpatient require more of the physician. Therefore, I can justify a higher level of E&M. So again, when you're assigning your E&M as far as an office and other outpatient setting, whether it's a physical standalone building or in a hospital, where doesn't really matter. It's the service that you render. And remember, in an E&M visit, we look at the history, the exam, and the medical decision making to determine what level of E&M code to assign. Now, I did also stress in that series of coding on E&M that time does play a factor. But again, as a coder, guys, take in consideration that you may have some slow physicians. And in that video, I said that if 50% or more of your office visit is spent as far as time with your patient, then you can base your E&M code on time. But as a coder, remember, I need to really consider the components that are going into that office visit. So if your physician is slow, and in his office visits where the E&M code says that based on that code, it should take 10 to 15 minutes to do a 99213 or whatever. If your physician spends 45 minutes with his patient, but he's still assigning his level of E&M based on the history, exam, and medical decision making, then legally or ethically as a coder, I need to base my code on that history, exam, and medical decision making, whether or not he spent 45 minutes with the patient or 10 to 15 minutes as the code applies. I've just found that I have worked with physicians that tend to spend more time with their patients, and they're just doing the history, exam, and medical decision making and not actually counseling the patient on another condition or something that's going on that would justify me coming out of the actual E&M based on history, exam, and medical decision making and doing it based on time. So I hope that makes sense. Look at your office visit E&M code and apply the correct code based on what was done with your patient, not based on time if time is not the true component of that of the office visit. If that office visit was based on the history, exam, and medical decision making, and it took an hour, then base your coding on that level of history, exam, and medical decision making and not on time. But if, for example, your patient does come in and your patient does a certain level of history, exam, and medical decision making, and then the care does take off on a rant or some type of counseling with the patient and it begins to take up 50% or more of the time, yes, by all means, assign your E&M based on time. And as coders, when you come into these new facilities that you start coding for, just because something has been done one way in the past, as a coder, if you don't agree with it, really check into the coding to determine whether or not you agree with doing that. Because Medicare is like the IRS. Medicare audits your codes. Medicare knows those physician offices that automatically auto-assign 99204 for every new patient that walks in their office. That every new patient that's assigned a 99204 from a physician's office, whether the documentation is there or not, they know those offices that automatically assign that level of E&M to that office visit. They're watching. And they can take back money if the documentation does not justify the coding. So be very careful with what you're coding. Know your facts about your levels of E&M as far as the setting that you're in. And just remember that not all patients are the same. So all new patients can't come in with a 99204. Look at your documentation that your physician is putting. Let's see, make sure I covered everything I wanted to cover. And don't follow your trends in your office. The point of coding according to the level of expertise exercised in the patient and physician encounter cannot be overstressed. A little care on the front could save your office hours of work and headache on the back end during an audit. If I don't stress anything else in this video, let me say that again. The point of coding according to the level of expertise exercised in the patient-physician encounter cannot be overstressed. A little care on the front end could save your office hours of work and headaches on the back end during an audit. So make sure your coding was actually documented, because the rule of thumb is if it wasn't documented, it was not done. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next video.